What's up, family? Welcome to what's going to be a really quick and short episode here, and don't even know if I'd call this an episode. We're going to look at a comment that was left on our YouTube channel, and it was a great comment. For those of you who don't know, I hold to the standard Christian belief of eternal punishment of the wicked. What that means is that for those who do not come to Christ and do not repent, there is a punishment for that. And that punishment is what is commonly referred to as hell. And if you ask me what that is, what hell is, that I am going to try to stay away from. And the reason why is because I don't think that we actually know exactly what hell is going to be like for the unelect. We have imagery within the scriptures, and basically what I believe is that it's a place that you definitely don't want to be. I think it's an absence of the presence of God. And I wouldn't, obviously a place cannot be absent of the total presence of God, but basically it is a place where God's wrath is poured out. And I don't know what that means. I don't know if that means that it's just devoid of holiness and just a really awful place, or if it, is eternal fire, or if that's just imagery. I don't know. But here is the comment that we got. And actually, maybe before I read the comment, I should just say some people believe in what's called annihilation theology. Annihilation theology basically says God, one of the reasons that people believe in annihilation theology is because they say that God would not torment people for eternity. That would be unjust. And therefore, they believe in what's called annihilation theology. Annihilation theology says that there is no such place as hell. What basically happens is the judgment comes, the elect are taken into heaven or given access to heaven, and then those who are unelect are not put into hell or anything like that, but rather they are just annihilated. They are no more, and their punishment is being no more and not being in the presence of God. I think that there are some major issues with this theology. One of the main issues that I've brought up, which people haven't seemed to understand this argument, and maybe that's because I haven't really explained it very well, but one of the arguments that I've brought up against annihilation theology is if non-existence is considered to be hell or our punishment, and if we didn't exist from eternity past, in other words, we did not exist up until the time when we were born, right? So before the world was created, before time was created, we were not. Then in essence, we would have already spent eternity past in hell. Everyone would have, including the elect. So I think that's one of my reasons that I obviously would not believe in annihilation theory. The other reason is I don't think that the Bible teaches it. So one of the things that we need to look at real quick is, does God punish people for eternity? And in Revelation 29 through 10, it does say this. It says, "And they marched up over the broad plain of the earth and surrounded the camp of the saints and the beloved city." It's talking about Satan and his army. "But fire came down from heaven and consumed them. And the devil who had deceived them was thrown into the lake of fire and sulfur, where the beast and the false prophet were, and they will be tormented day and night forever and ever." Okay, so certainly we see that God will torment some creatures forever. So, I mean, this could get into all kinds of different ideas of whether or not, what was created and what was not. I believe that obviously demons and angels and Satan were created beings. Okay, so here's the question that was posed to me. Mark on our YouTube channel says, "Hello, Caleb. Can you explain how annihilation undermines the holiness of God and eternal punishment in contrast? If you have a video on this, please let me know." Okay. So we've already seen that God will punish some of his creation for eternity. So the question is why wouldn't he punish others? And I think that our mindset is that we are, basically we have compassion for our own. But here's the thing is that you might say, okay, well, Satan and his army and the false prophet and the Antichrist, the beast, they are enemies of God. And can we really say that that those who are not elect are enemies of God? Well, James actually says that they are. And so does Psalm 37:20. But James says this. He says, you adulterous people, this is in James 4:4, by the way. Do you adulterous people, do you not know that friendship with the world is enmity with God? Therefore, whoever wishes to be a friend of the world makes himself an enemy of God. So one of the reasons that I think annihilation theory undermines the holiness of God is because when we think about punishment, what is the punishment for sin? The punishment for sin is death. The soul that sins will surely die, and we have other examples of the fact that the punishment for sin, all of sin and fallen short of the glory of God, okay, and the punishment for sin is death. And so the question is, what does that mean in terms of punishment for the wicked? If we say that punishment for the wicked is just not being, then I've already explained one of the reasons that I think that actually undermines human existence in general. But if we say that there's a time period for punishment, so for instance, that somebody goes to hell, and then after a certain amount of time, God's holiness has been satisfied through punishment of the wicked, and now all of a sudden they're annihilated. So let's say that there's a time period in hell and for the amount of sin that they've done, and then they're annihilated. Well, that says that ultimately what that does is gets rid of the need for Christ. And the reason why is because if God's holiness can be satisfied through punishment of the wicked for a certain amount of time, then we've just put a price on God's holiness. In other words, let's say that a person who's been really bad in their life, they're going to be tormented in hell for, I don't know, 1 trillion years. And then after 1 trillion years, they're just going to be annihilated because God is just and God will not, and God wouldn't punish someone forever. First of all, that means that God's holiness is only worth X amount of time. You've put a time period on God's holiness. And what that means is that really Christ didn't need to come. If God could just punish everyone for the amount of time that would make it so that his holiness was satisfied, then all of a sudden there's no reason for Christ to come. People should just suffer their punishment and then be with God. And this goes into the idea of like the whole world being saved, okay? But ultimately, God's holiness is infinite. And to say that basically the reason that I would say that annihilation theology undermines the holiness of God is because that says that God's holiness is not worth eternal punishment. In other words, God's holiness, like God is super holy and he's very holy. He's holy this much, but he's not holy enough that his holiness demands punishment of the wicked and punishment of the wicked for eternity. But the fact of the matter is God is holy infinitely. He is infinitely holy. This also ties into the reason that Yeshua or Jesus Christ needs to be eternal both directions. The deity of the Messiah, the deity of Jesus Christ, is incredibly important for our theology. The reason why is because a person who doesn't have an infinite life in both directions can't pay for sin. And the reason why on that note is because God's holiness is infinite in both directions. If you make a stain, if you diminish holiness that is infinite, then it needs to be paid back infinitely. This applies to all sin. And not only that, but this applies to our nature. Since Adam sinned, it made us different creatures. It made us creatures that are offensive to God because we are no longer holy. And therefore, even our nature needs to be paid for. And that nature and that payment has to be done by something that is infinite. And therefore, either the payment is infinite for us in terms of punishment of the wicked is infinite in nature because holiness is infinite in nature. God's holiness is infinite in nature. Or the payment has to be something else that's infinite in nature that will pay for our sin. And that is what? That is only God. Only God is infinite in nature, in terms of his being. His being is infinite in both directions. And this is why the deity of the Messiah, the deity of Jesus Christ, is so vital for our theology. So this is why I think that annihilation theology undermines the holiness of God, because it basically says that God's holiness is not important enough for punishment to be dealt out for eternity to satisfy that holiness. So, Mark, thank you for the question. I hope that answered your question. I would like to ask you, if you are not already subscribed to this YouTube channel, please subscribe to this YouTube channel. You can do that by clicking the subscribe button. It might not seem like a lot, but it actually helps us here at Growing in Messiah. Thank you so much, and I will see you next time.